Hi, welcome to our Communities of Grace leadership training. This is the last of our 7 videos. So I want to talk to you today about launching people into their calling. So now this section, kind of like the last one, but this really deals with the ultimate purpose of your group. You know, we have to answer that question of why are we here? What are we meeting for? Are we meeting for friendship? Is this for support? For studying the scriptures, or is it for something bigger? Hopefully you've been through all these other videos. You've heard me talk about this stuff. You have a sense of, yeah, I want to be part of this bigger picture that God is doing. Do we want to be a part of him expanding his kingdom, right? Because, you know, I think the true test of our real motives is when God comes in to disrupt our comfort zone. I mean, what are we going to do when he asks us to move, where we ask us to change or to step out in faith? He will, because that's what he does. Jesus will call us to follow him, and sometimes into something uncomfortable. He's going to move someone away. He's going to bring too many new people in, or he's going to give one of your leaders a new calling or a new thing. And in that moment, you're going to have to decide who is in charge of your destiny, who's in charge of your group. And in many of the groups I've seen, there's a tendency in some of these difficult moments when we're challenged to kind of close ranks. And you love these people. If you've done some of this stuff really well and you really confide in one another, you pray for one another, you help one another, we're applying scripture together, you're like, man, I love these people. I love this meeting. It just fills me up every week. And so if you're like a lot of people, that you want to protect that with everything you've got, like you want to lock it down. You don't want to break it up. It's like, we found something here. We don't want to lose it. And so, that can be we're closed. We have too many people, right? Like, or who's going to teach our group if that person leaves? There can be a start to panic. And we want to do anything we can to keep this thing that we feel like we found the magic formula, and we don't want to lose it. So will we be able to open up if a new person comes in? You ask that question, but you don't want to miss out on what God has for you. But what is the alternative, right? How do we prepare for it? So there is an alternative to doing that. And I want to look at a critical point in the early church from a perspective, though, that you may not have considered. So, several of these, we've talked about the early church in Acts. And here in Acts 13, we see this critical point in the church in Antioch, this little church, that you could easily go right by in the bigger picture of what you're reading. But the church at Antioch was started right after Pentecost. There's a group of believers that had fled persecution. And the Jerusalem believers started hearing about it. They started hearing God's moving up there, and there's this weird mix of Gentiles and different things. And so they sent Barnabas to check it out, to say, go see what's happening there. We're hearing word of it. Go check it out, because they trusted his judgment. And then Barnabas got there, encouraged them somewhat, and brought in Saul, so soon to become Paul. And they taught the believers there for over a year. And so I want you to imagine if your little small group of people, if your elders were Paul and Barnabas, that had to be a powerful congregation to be a part of, right? I mean, you would never want to let that go. So what happens when God has other plans? It says in Acts 13:1, now there were at Antioch, in the church was there prophets and teachers, Barnabas and Simeon, who was called Niger, and Lucius of Cyrene, and Manaen, who had been brought up with Herod the Tetrarch, and Saul. While they were ministering to the Lord and fasting, the Holy Spirit said, set apart for me Barnabas and Saul for the work to which I have called them. Then, when they had fasted and prayed and laid their hands on them, they sent them away. So what do you do when God says, I'm taking Barnabas and Saul from your church? I mean, I think it's a tremendous mark of maturity in that church that it so willingly sent them. I mean, who taught them after that? Who led them? Who prayed for them? We don't know who it was after that. But we don't see any evidence that the church fell apart either. I mean, they didn't fail. They continued to be quietly mentioned throughout the rest of the book. So you get the idea. This is a faithful church that continued on after that, and it continued to grow. And we see Barnabas and Paul checking back in there as they went. So we know that was still a faithful church that was doing a lot. So if you look at that, as a church, to have two, like these huge leaders in your church, a super encourager, loving discipler like Barnabas, and someone like Saul, who was trained as a Pharisee and was a tremendous teacher and a powerful, obviously, leader who becomes, the writer of much of the New Testament. So it was an early part, but that's a huge shift within an organization. But in smaller ways, we can experience those things as well. I came to Christ when I was a freshman at OU, and I was discipled for 2 years by Jeremy McLean. Jeremy was a pastor's kid. He was a genuine, just really genuine good guy who loved Jesus more than anything. And Jeremy knew a lot. And when I came to Christ as a freshman, I didn't know anything. So Jeremy patiently answered my dumb questions and led me through how to study the scriptures and things like that. And he just, all the basics I got from him in those 2 years. I depended on him. I asked him everything. I wanted to meet with him anytime I could. And so after 2 years of meeting with Jeremy as a new Christian, he graduated and was called to be a missionary in Kazakhstan. So he didn't just graduate, but he moved all the way across the world. I had no way to talk to him. And, this was just a scary moment. I mean, even to this day, I haven't had but a few short conversations with Jeremy since that moment. So how was I going to function without this guy who was such a critical mentor to me? I mean, I didn't think I was ready at that time. I was scared to death. But I mean, that's when I grew up as a believer. And I was more ready than I thought. I was ready because Jeremy had taught me how to seek the scriptures for myself. He taught me how to study. He taught me how to memorize. He taught me how to pray. He taught me how to do a lot of things. And I had a lot of skills built into me over those 2 years that I was prepared to use. But I was also ready because I'd already been leading a Bible study, although badly, on my dorm floor. And terrified as I was, that was a turning point in my faith and my ministry. God knew what he was doing. And if we're really about spiritual growth and participating in God's work in the world, we have to accept that his plans are better than ours and to be prepared for disruption. This is what he does. The people in your group have spiritual gifts that God wants to develop and use. We don't know what he might have in store for them. But there are two primary things that I think your group members need if they're going to launch into their callings. So first, they need opportunities to use their gifts. So notice them, give them opportunities to use them with your group. Your group will be better for it because it'll be a more complete body, but they will grow as well. Let them stretch their legs and see that God can use them. And the community group is the safest place in the world for them to try it out. And when I first started leading that dorm Bible study in that small group of people, it was terrible. I didn't know much. I was not giving them the greatest study they'd ever had. And I don't know how much anybody learned. I never heard of any major, changes in faith that anybody had from that Bible study. But it was a real turning point for me because it gave me a chance to learn. It gave me a chance to prepare a certain way. It gave me a chance to lead. And I certainly approached reading the Bible very differently when I had to teach people. I kind of got thrown into the deep end. And so when Jeremy left and then I was called upon to disciple several guys, I felt like, okay, it's on me. And that changed my faith to actively have to participate in it. And so even though I fumbled around with it a lot and struggled with it early on, it was critical in shaping the way I grew in my faith. So give them opportunities to use their gifts. Second, your people need a push to get out there and use their gifts. So they need to be encouraged to step out there. If they're ready and they should be leading their own group, let them know that you see that in them. They may not take you up on it right away, but you need to reinforce that. I mean, if they could be a valuable addition serving somewhere or reaching out to an unbelieving neighbor, give them that push to take a step because knowing that somebody believes in them and trusts them to do it makes a big difference in having the courage. That's what Jeremy's move did for me. I mean, that was his calling from God and he obeyed it. But it put me on the spot and handed the mantle of discipleship off to me to say, now it's your turn to start doing it. And I guarantee there were people in Antioch who got their opportunity to teach and lead after Barnabas and Saul left as well. I mean, we're going to be building in times of reflection for you. So we're going to have times within our church calendar that we're going to do reflection or reevaluation. I'm going to encourage you to do some of those things. And it's going to be in our ministry calendar, but those will be times for you to talk about each other's gifts, to ask if anyone needs to be taking on a new volunteer leadership role or re-signing it. We're going to be re-signing for groups, different things like that. We want there to be a natural rhythm of evaluating and praying about people. want to be operating on the assumption that he is growing people, that he is developing gifts in the people in your group, that all of them are created in his image. They're all given spiritual gifts, and that he is developing those gifts and preparing to launch them into new ministries. So periodically, if we're operating on that assumption, we're going to step back and ask and see, what is he doing? When he says, follow me, we go, right? So what does this mean practically for your group? So yeah, we know they need opportunities to use their gifts. We know they need to push sometimes to get out there and use them. How do we build that in to what we do as a group? Well, if you want to bring these two elements into it, first I would go back to the first video we did, and we talked about the structure for how we build our group. So if you put that structure into place that we talked about the first time, you're already doing part of it. Because the reason we have each person take ownership for one of these pieces that we talked about, you remember we've walked now through all these videos. We did confiding, praying, helping, applying, inviting, and now launching. And the reason we put somebody attached to each one of those, when we did that right from the start, is that we're establishing everybody has a role in this group. There's not a leader that does everything. There's not a host that does everything. If I'm a part of this group, then I take ownership of taking on a role with it, right? So I come in and I say, you know what? I can pray for people, or I can help with the confiding side. I have a good sense of empathy and I can draw people in, right? You want people to start to see their gifts and acting on them. Even if they're fumbling around with it and they haven't really done it before, we want them to have opportunity to stretch their ministry legs. And so by leading a part of the meeting, they're getting to use those gifts. As you see ability, it is always good to encourage and allow them to do even more. So even the basic structure, though, helps everyone to be an active part. So use that structure to let people use their gifts, right? So as you do it, as these people are doing it, leading a group also does not feel so intimidating. So make sure everyone has a role. If someone hasn't incorporated that, now is a good time to help that person get engaged if you feel like they haven't really jumped in. So make sure you're prompting everyone to actively lead the part of the meeting that they're doing. So if you're skipping parts of that structure, not only is it you're neglecting an aspect of the health of your group, but you might also be neglecting someone being able to utilize their gifts. So we get some of those, like we talked in the helping category about there may not always be a big crisis. And part of the reason we bring those things up each week, it gives the person who's taken ownership of that something to do each week, something to pray about, something to think about. They're in the habit of every time I'm here, I'm on for some aspect of our group, even if it's a small one. So don't neglect any of these aspects, because you're also maybe neglecting a person and their gift. So the other part will come when we talk about the giving them a push, will come when we have times of reflection and reevaluation. So ask about what people are doing. As a leader, take the time to reflect on the strengths you see in the members of your group. So you pray for them, you ask God to show you where someone has a gift waiting to be used. And if he's calling someone and you see it, tell them that directly. Make sure that they hear it from you, and make sure they hear it in a positive way, not a shame that you're not doing enough. This isn't a performance thing. This is, I see a gift in you, you need to use it. And oftentimes, the people around that person see that gift in its infancy before they do. They may not realize how well they handled this prayer situation, that when they stopped and said, wait, let's pray for that person, they just did it because it seemed like the right thing to do in the moment. But you want to be able to point and say, you have a gift there. Like you were discerning in that moment. You saw it and you stepped in, and the way you prayed was really powerful. You should be doing more of that, right? So when you notice that as a leader, that is a huge thing to impart to somebody. And they remember that when someone calls that out. When someone tells you, hey, you have a gift, you need to use it. You have a responsibility. God's made you a steward of that. Use it. So be direct. And if you call them out in the group, that's great. You could also meet with them privately. Find a time to talk privately and say, I've noticed this in you, and I'm wondering how God might be leading you. But have those conversations. So does someone want to take on a new role? You might also see that this person is, needing to start somewhere, and you say, you're such an engaging person. Like you should really be helping on the greeter team or something like that. It might be just a role like that. It might be like you could lead your own group. And while we love having you here, I know you could do well to lead your own group of people. And maybe it's time for you to do that. Does someone feel convicted that they should start their own group? Do they feel a conviction that they should be reaching out or serving someone new, something like that? Prompt them to have the conversation. This is part of your job. A lot of times the leader of the group is the one doing this launching part. And part of your role as the leader is not as so much as a teacher, but these little things to notice the people in your group and say, man, you should be doing that. And encourage them in it. Be excited for them. Be excited when you see them growing. Be excited when you see opportunities that God could use. These are the kinds of things we should be expecting to see God do. He's working in the lives of our people in our group. We should expect it. We should prepare for it. We should encourage it. We should be walking in this way. So in application, now that you're done, this is the 7th video, and we've seen the overall structure for a group. Go back to the exercise you did after the first section. So I want you to list out the names of the people in your group. Yeah, you did this already, but I want you to do it again. And if it's a new group, it might just be you and another couple. And if so, that's fine. You still want to be familiar with how God has put your group together, the people you know. So name the strengths that you see in each person. Identify which part of the group meeting you think fits them best. You may already be doing this, but it's okay to reevaluate it as well. So look through confiding, praying, helping, applying, inviting, and launching. Has anything changed since you got more familiar with it? As you've gone through all these videos and learned a little more about what we're talking about with each of these categories, if your group's been meeting for a while, you might also take some time to pray through the members of your group and ask God if he might be leading them towards the next step. Is there somebody in your group that you feel like it's time for you to kind of get out of the nest, buddy? It's time. You're ready. You're ready to launch. And if that conversation you need to have, now's the time to say, you know what? I was watching this and I felt convicted that I need to tell you, you got a lot of gifts you're not using. Let's find a way to use them, right? And encourage that person along the way. They're not ending their relationship with you. They're just launching into a new calling. So when you have when you've done that, when you spend some time praying over these things and asking those questions, we're gonna need 2 things from you. So as we kind of wrap all this up and we're trying to launch into this new time period as a church, we're gonna need a couple things from you just so that we can be able to support your group and so that we can send people to you. So first, I need the community group details form filled out. So that way we know the basic details of your group. You can find that on the Communities of Grace page on our website. And so we've got a simple form to fill out just to make sure we have basic data on when and where you're meeting and stuff like that. That helps us because when I get people sign up and they tell me their schedules, I can refer them to you and say, hey, here's a group that meets on Wednesday night, right? So I need that detail kind of information on that. And second, I want to schedule a regular coaching call with you. So this was a lot of information. If you watch through all 7 of these videos, I'm sure there's certain aspects are second nature to you and you're like, yeah, we do that really well. But others may be a struggle to implement. No doubt. There's no way you're walking in and you're like, yep, we do all 6 of those things really well, right? Everybody struggles with certain aspects and they have people that get it and people that don't. And I want to help you implement this. And I don't expect that you go through these little 15, 20-minute videos and you've just got it down just because you heard me talk about it, right? There's going to be a process of practicing these things within your group. And that means there's a trial and error, fail forward period on some of them as well. Some of them you'll easily just go, I know what we need to do there. We got it. Others you're going to need to really slog through and work at in a group. And so I want to make this helpful and focused. I don't want to take too much of your time, but I want to get in the habit of talking so that we're checking in. So I want to schedule a 30-minute call every 2 weeks with all of our leaders. This is the commitment I'm making because I want to invest in you guys. So this helps me to know how I can be praying for your group, how we can be helping your group. It helps the communication lines to be open. We talked about in that helping category, informing us if there's things going on that we can help or pray for. I want to have those communication lines be open, but it also builds in a regular time for you to ask questions, for us to evaluate these 6 things and say, how are they going? Which ones are a struggle for your group? It's not rocket science. It's not that you need to get a master's degree of this stuff, but it's amazing how the simple commitment to coaching helps accelerate the growth of your group. So email me or call and let's get a coaching time set up. And what you're doing by leading a group, it does require a certain commitment to people and it is an extra bit of effort, but I'm telling you, you're never going to regret the investment you make in people. And if you're getting to do what we're talking about in this video we're talking about launching people into their callings, I promise you're going to identify. In 3 John 4, he says, I have no greater joy than this, to hear of my children walking in the truth. And I'm telling you, if you have a chance to launch people into their calling, there is no greater joy than to see someone that you helped encourage or strengthen or disciple in some way in your group, and you're able to launch them and see them taking off and serving God in some way. Man, it is the best thing ever. So I am thrilled for you guys' sake to go on this journey with you. I'm excited to see what God is going to do, and I love walking through it with you. So I look forward to talking to you soon. Let's go get started.